Hey guys, Deluxatia here. Today I wanted to make a video on how to make an AJAX form submission on Netlify without using jQuery and by using vanilla JavaScript. So for anyone that's watching this video, I'm assuming you have a site or will have a site on Netlify and you have a form on it. And if you look on the Netlify documentation, they have an option to submit any forms with AJAX, but they give you an example in jQuery. And now, there are some people out there that don't want to use jQuery, but vanilla JavaScript. So maybe some people are making simple portfolio sites, and they have a contact page on the bottom or so, and they're using vanilla JavaScript in the entire thing. Maybe you wouldn't want to just import jQuery just to submit a form like that. That's just overkill. So, when I was researching online on how to find a vanilla JavaScript solution, I couldn't really find a straightforward one. I had to use bits of information everywhere and piece together a solution. So I figured I'd just post a video so I can just make it simpler for everyone else. I could just post my findings here. So I'm going to do that. So right now, I just have an empty Netlify account, and I'm just going to start from the beginning on how to make a form with this. I'm assuming that you know some HTML, CSS, JavaScript, so I won't be getting into too much detail about it. I'll put some helpful links in the description for some of the pointers I might make, but I'm assuming you know how a form works and such. Anyway, I'll just show you the code. So this is what the form looks like. This is a basic page. I used the Materialize CSS framework, so it's at least bearable to look at. You don't have to. Obviously, you don't have to use this framework to get the same result as me. I'm just making it look a little nicer with this framework. It's a good framework, I have to say. So it's just the basic HTML markup. Made the font size a little bigger so you can see it on the screen. And I basically put a div with the ID of contact, and you'll see soon why that matters. And then I just took the form that they had on the documentation for Netlify. So this form, I basically took this form and added onto it. I made it a little different. For the one they have on the default on the documentation, the way that one works is that it doesn't have an action attribute attached to it, right? So when you submit a form on Netlify using that, it will automatically redirect you to a another page, a success page, basically, as it says in the documentation. And my tutorial, I didn't want to do that. I just wanted it to stay within the page. So part of achieving that, as it says here in this block of text, is to add the action attribute and put a relative pathway to your for success. So what I did is I just linked it to this div with the ID of contact with this relative link here. So I basically used the same template they had there. I just took out something else. I took out the role part, basically, and so it just looks like a contact form you would have on a portfolio, I'd say. So you have your name, your email, then the message, and then submit. Below that is the JavaScript for the Materialize framework. In my version, when I make the form submission, I'm going to have something called a toast come up, which is Materialize's form of an alert. And it'll just show up in the area confirming that the information's been sent. This is a copy of the jQuery code that they have on Netlify's documentation on how to submit the form using AJAX. I think I'll just quickly talk about how it works so you can see how it translates over to the vanilla JavaScript version I have. So basically, they select the form. In their version, they have my form as the ID on the form tag itself. I don't have it here, but that's the context. And then saying that when it submits, the default functionality for a form is that once you submit, it submits the information to a file, usually a PHP file, and then the page redirects elsewhere. And you will want to prevent that from happening, and you don't want that to happen. So to do that, you pass in the event object, and then you call the prevent default method function, so that it doesn't write to a file or it doesn't redirect to a page. After that, they wrap it with the jQuery $sign so that with this form object they can have access to more jQuery methods. And then on the next line, they use this post method. This is just jQuery shorthand for making a post request, and it comes with two parameters. The first parameter is the URL that you're sending the request to. So like I said, so in our case you would want to send it to wherever the action is pointing to on your form, and that's what they're doing with this jQuery code here. They're selecting the attribute of the form that they're choosing, that they're on, and then returning the value of what's associated with the action attribute. Form.serialize, this is a very handy function. So what it does, it basically takes your form information and serializes it into a URL encoded string. Because when you do these HTTP requests, you usually have to send your data in the form of a string. So if you're familiar with JSON, you might recognize that you have to call JSON.stringify on whatever your data is when you send it. And that's kind of like a similar case here, where since Netlify doesn't support JSON, they do these URL encoded strings instead. And serialize is a jQuery function that has the convenience of converting your data into that serialized, into that URL encoded string. And then after that, it has a callback function that just has a simple alert saying thank you. That's the basic idea of the jQuery code. So now I'll show you the vanilla JavaScript version that I have that works. And it's just this. So all you have to do is first, like in the jQuery example, you select your form. Document.querySelector is a modern way to do it. This whole thing is a modern vanilla JavaScript, by the way, I'd say. After you select your form element, you want to add an event listener to it that listens to the submit event. After that, we pass in the event object and put it in through an arrow function. And then just like in the jQuery example, we prevent the default so it doesn't write to a file. And then the next step is to take your form element and create a new form data object out of it. And what a form data object is, it's an object that contains a form data in the form of key value pairs, and it's intended to be used in HTTP requests or XML HTTP requests where you would send things like with post requests. You'd want to send your form data fields, your form fields and names and their values. So that's why it's important on your forms to have name attributes on your inputs, because this is what's going to be captured on Netlify for each of those key value pairs. So in your form data, in order to fulfill the name section, you have to make sure that you have these name attributes on your inputs. Make sure you put that there. So in the form data object, you have these names as your keys, and then the appropriate values are whatever the user inputs into the input tags. Pretty straightforward. Then the next step is to make the HTTP request. So we have the fetch API. We'll use that. If you don't know much about the fetch API, I'll have a link to the MDN Mozilla Developer Network's article on using fetch. But the basic idea is that the first parameter of the fetch function is the URL you're sending the request to. And we basically did the same thing, like similar to the jQuery example, where the first parameter is a URL there, like that. We do the same thing where we take our selected form element and we get the value associated with the attribute action. So this will be substituted with this value. Next is the optional parameter of options. And in this case, we need it because we're making a post request, because by default it interprets it as a GET request, but we need this object of options here to specify what we're submitting. So since we're making a submission, we want to do a post request. We want to specify its post under method. And then we also need to send some extra information about our request. So we need a header key value pair as well. And for headers, we need to specify what's the type of our content that we're sending. And it's going to be a URL encoded string, but the official way to put it in this fetch API is to write it this way: application/x www form URL encoded. And in some places I see that, I think it's optional, but you can never go wrong with specifying the character set, which is UTF-8, that's standard. And you also do the same thing with accept, the accept parameter. The order doesn't seem to matter, by the way, so you can just put that in whatever order. And then the body is, you're specifying what is the actual data you're sending. And that's kind of the meat of your request. So this is where we're going to send the form data. But the thing is, you want to first pass it through, and you first want to create a URL search params object out of it. And that object basically has URL search params is an interface that allows you to have utilities that works for query strings for URLs. So this is going to be important for our request. And from my research, this is what you need to do when you're trying to send form URL encoded strings. Of course, this is an object, and whenever you make a request, you want to send it as a string, similarly how you do for JSON. You stringify your JSON. In the same manner, URL search params objects have a built-in function of toString, so that'll stringify your query string. And that's basically it. You make your request, and as you might know with the fetch API, it returns a promise. So you want to call .then on it to you want to run a callback function once you get a response, which is what the res stands for. So when we call .then, we take our response and then we run a callback function on it. And we say that if we get a response, then this is we do something with it. In this case, I have materializes the materialize framework here. So they have a function called toast, as I mentioned earlier, and it'll just be a little pop-up that comes up. They'll just confirm that we made the submission. So this will be the content of it, of that little notification. Thank you for your submission. And you can also add classes to it. And I put this pulse class so that when it comes up, the little toast will be pulsating. That's the entirety of our code. So I'm just going to demonstrate that it works. This is just a local version. Let me close it. So that's what it looks like. So I'm going to deploy our little tiny website onto Netlify. It's been deployed, and usually with the contact forms, for example, you want to get an email notification when you submit your forms, right? You want to get an email telling you that someone submitted something on your website. So you want to go to forms, hit your contact form. Excuse me. You want to go to settings and usage. Go to form notifications, add notifications, and then email notifications. You want to listen for your form submission. You can choose any form you want to listen on. I just doing any form by default. Then pick the email that you want to receive the notification. Great. So now it's ready to get a notification. My email address is able to do it. So now let's check out our site. And it should work at this point. So I'm just going to do a sample message here. Test guy @gmail.com. Put a little message. Your website is awesome. So when I hit send, a toast should come up, and I should get a notification from my email, and I should also see it on the back end of my Netlify account. There's a little toast. And when I go to forms, I should see a submission. And it's there. See name, email, testguy@gmail.com, message, your website is awesome. And if I go to my email, refresh, this is just saying that I started the website, but this is what we're looking for. We get an email confirmation saying the message, all the information in the contact form. Yeah, so that's it. I hope you guys find this information useful, and you can apply it to whatever you're looking for. If not, I'll put some helpful links that I use in making this solution in the video description, and you can probably use that as a starting point to find another solution in case this one doesn't work. And if there's any mistakes I made in the video, please make a comment and tell me if there's any mistakes, so you can also inform anyone else watching the video that I made a mistake in it. All right, thank you. Have a good day.